Welcome back. You're with RT. Now, a Democratic mayor in the US city of Providence has promised this week he would seek to right the wrongs of the past through a reparations process towards minority communities. The mayor claims the process is an historic move and it will see meetings held over historically contentious issues and a review of laws perceived to discriminate against black and Indigenous communities. But it's not everybody's cup of tea. This is what some of the opposition have said.
While acknowledging that the Liberal left agenda has failed black and minority communities in contemporary times by forcing their children to attend failed schools and by enacting policies that make it easy to become dependent on the government, it would be an unprecedented and immoral act of government to seek reparations, even for the horrible wrongs that were committed generations ago.
Reparations were also approved this week too in the US city of Ashville, where money will be invested into poor black communities. The authorities in both cities claim that such initiatives are just the beginning of wider changes.
A lot of folks are going to jump straight to the reparations question. How much, what form, for how long, who's eligible? Those are all legitimate questions, but they're questions for another day. And they're questions that will be answered through the process. It's important to go step by step with this.
In my mind, this resolution is a first step in that it names a vast list of historical wrongs that have been perpetuated against the black community up until this very day.
OK, well, let's discuss these issues further now, because we're joined by Reese, author and political analyst, and also Anthony Brian Logan, political and social issues commentator. And you're both very welcome as ever. Anthony, if I can just start with you, are these good first steps, do you think, when it comes to helping deprived black communities in society?
Not really. All I heard from the mayor is just a bunch of lip service, a bunch of, well, promises. Maybe we're going to do something in the future. Just kind of the same thing they always do during election time or any other time or some kind of civil unrest or whatnot. Give promises, or we're going to do a study, we're going to figure it out. I mean, how have we not figured it out yet? Slavery ended in 1865. This is the year 2020. What are we really going to study? What are we really going to try to figure out to try and calculate? I mean, you should know it by now. They're not really going to do anything. This is just pure and simple virtue signaling. That is it, and that is all.
Reese, is this how you see it?
Not at all, but ABL raises a very important point. That point is that in the over 200 years since the end of slavery, in the time since government-sanctioned discrimination against people, Jim Crow, and war on drugs and things of that nature, in that time, never has the government ever taken one step towards understanding and calculating and studying the effects and the impact of slavery on African-American people. Now, it allows people like ABL to come in and make statements of, oh, it's not necessary, oh, there's no need for this. Why? Because there's never been a study to even indicate what the debt owed actually is, what the trauma cause actually has created, what generational impact exists present day for the people who are the descendant of slaves. And because that research has never taken place, people like ABL can make statements with vast ignorance because there's really no statistic to point to.
Reese, just on that, how do we know, I mean, but if you look back at the history, how will that help you solve today's crisis when many people say, look, this is just a very bad economic situation I find myself in a deprived inner city area? How will looking back at history help that person?
Well, so here's what's important to realize, that in addition to enslavement, in addition to the enforcement of segregation, in addition to discriminatory practices, the war on drugs, police brutality, all of these things have a collective economic impact on the black community. And so because we've not ever studied that, you just look at a people in a community in a so-called ghetto who don't own property, who only 40% own property, or there's there's high unemployment, or there's low education or inequality in the education that people have access to based on property taxes. You look at these things and you see them separate from the institution of systemic racism, and therein lies the problem. When you separate why people are in the situation that they're in from how they got there, then you get to blame the issue on black people and say it's an economic issue when that's not it. People have been systematically deprived by a systemic racist institution.
Okay, Anthony, you just said that this was all lip service from politicians. What sort of action would you like to see?
Oh, we don't need any action, really.
And he's got a point there as well. This is a resolution.
Go ahead, Anthony.
There's no action needed.
This is merely a resolution.
There's no action needed because what's going to happen here is all they're going to do is say, all right, here's some promises, here's some lofty goals, and they never achieve them. They always do this. It's the same thing the Democratic candidates running for president did in this election cycle. Reparations, how do you feel about that, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, everybody else? Oh, we're going to look into it. We're going to do a study. But then when it comes to the LGBTQ community, what are we going to do? We're going to do X, we're going to do Y, we're going to do Z. When it comes to the Hispanics, when it comes to amnesty and stuff like that, we're going to have amnesty. We're going to put it on the books on the first day. Okay, they have concrete things they're going to do for other communities that they lay out in black and white. But then when it comes to reparations or something like that, oh, we don't know. It's got to be a study. Nothing but lip service. If you're going to give it, it should have happened back during slavery or right after it, so you can identify who the slave master was and who the slave is now. If we're going to do it right now, who's going to pay for it? Are you going to pay for it, Reese, out of your own tax money? How about me, out of my own tax money? Because the government only makes money from us. They don't really generate money. If they do generate money, it comes from our tax money. So how does it even make any sense? Nobody's alive right now that was a slave owner or a slave. You could say people benefited from it. So what? You benefited from it too if you live in the country, and so did I. So should we pay it? Then what if you get down to the nitty gritty of who's mixed race and who owns slaves in their past? It's kind of crazy.
Reese, just on that issue of paying for all of this, this is a very contentious issue because when it comes down to money, it affects everybody, doesn't it? So who will pay for this? Who would you like to see pay for this, Reese?
You know what I find very funny? You know what I find funny? No one cares about where the money for reparations comes or where money comes from to pay people until it comes to paying black people. When there needed to be a $1,200 stimulus check sent out, no one was saying, oh, well, that comes from the taxpayer. That's a refund. We shouldn't do that. No, it was all fine and dandy. Why? Because it was necessary to keep the American people in a stable situation because people needed food to feed their families, and that $1,200 equated into trillions of dollars of debt taken out by the American government. And so why is it that they could find money to come up with, to pay trillions of dollars to come up with a payment for people who need food and they couldn't come up with the same amount of money to restore African Americans in this country who they actually affirmatively took actions to harm? That's ridiculous to me. So I appreciate ABL's point.
Who is they, though? Because nobody's alive right now. Who is they?
This does need to be more than lip service. And right now, Ashville City is doing a resolution. But here's the issue. Asheville needs to do more than a resolution. They need to come up with an actual dollar figure of how much black people were harmed by their actual city, how much was stolen from them in forced labor, and how much has been harmed to them from discriminatory practices and the war on drugs.
Anthony, just on that, let's just assume then that the US government has said, OK, we'll open the printing presses, we'll give as much money as you want. How much money would be needed and what impact would it have?
I mean, who knows how much money they're going to need. I think I saw Bob Johnson, the former owner of BET, he said something like $14 trillion. I mean, where's that going to come from? The virus money was bad enough. You're talking about $6 trillion. And the reason why that was given, to Reese's point, is because the government said that we cannot work and we cannot go out here and make money. OK, but you're talking about reparations. I mean, who's to blame for that? People that are long dead, they're not coming back, that you can't dig up from their grave. Who's to blame for that? And where's money going to come from? It's going to come from me. So you're making me pay for sins of someone else that are long dead. OK, it doesn't make any sense at all. And then who really gets it? The actual, mechanism upon which the money will be delivered and who gets it is not going to be defined, nor will it ever be, because all they've ever done for the past 100 or so years is say, we promise you this, we promise you that, with no promises ever delivered.
Reese, just finally, because we're running out of time, but if we just look at communities that are deprived and depressed, and we're often looking at inner city areas. This is an issue, as I said at the top, that politicians have been trying to solve for decades and haven't been able to. I just wondered is this any different? Is this just another politician trying to come up with another way of saying, we're going to try and solve the inner city problem, but we're actually going to phrase it slightly differently?
I appreciate that. So here's the thing. This Ashville City Council created a resolution. The resolution in itself, is well-intentioned, but it's problematic. Why? Because it's not based in actual studies, and so they actually don't know the damage that needs to be corrected. If someone stole $1 trillion from the black community, or even $1 billion from the black community, you would need to calculate that and have them pay restitution. You can't provide reparations by definition until you know what you need to repair. There needs to be an assessment of what has been done, what black people have suffered specifically, and so that's why it's not the solution it needs to be. But we don't want organizations to keep or communities to start slapping reparations on top of every community redevelopment effort and calling it reparations if it's not.
Okay.
And this is not a cash payout, so it's actually not reparations.
And Anthony, last 15 seconds to you.
All right, yeah, I mean, reparations is not going to happen. If it was going to happen, it should have been back then, 1865, identify the slave master and the slave, fair transaction, and now 2020, it'll be me paying it, it'll be Reese paying it. It makes no sense at all.
OK, my thanks to you both. That was Reese Everson, author and political analyst, and also Anthony Bryan Logan, political and social issues commentator. Thank you.
Thank you.